I've been doing COVID work for so long, but now that I'm back, I'm very happy to be back, and thanks for having me today. So I will begin by sharing my screen and my presentation. Can everyone see that okay? We're good? Okay. All right. So my presentation is called Giving Back to Your Community and Yourself. So these are the things that I will cover today in the presentation. We're going to look at volunteering in Canada and Ontario, so some of the statistics with regards to that, why Canadians volunteer. We're going to look at the value of volunteering. What are some barriers to volunteering, how to get started, and some opportunities that may be available in the community. So I am probably preaching to most of the converted here because I think the majority of you are volunteers, but you can spread the word to others, and hopefully you'll learn something new today. Okay, so I was able to come up with some more recent statistics. So in 2018, 79% of Canadians aged 15 and over volunteered. Volunteering generally does decrease with age, but those mature volunteers, which some of you may fall in that category, they contribute more hours on average, with 222 hours per year of volunteer hours. Older volunteers are more likely to participate in public meetings. Now, I don't know if any of you had heard my previous presentation, but in 2013, the volunteer hours was only, the number of volunteers was only like 44%. So it has increased, but the reason for this increase is this study that was done includes both formal volunteer hours and informal volunteer hours. So by formal, we mean those people that are involved in organizations, so charities, not-for-profits. So for example, the Grenville Council on Aging, that would classify as formal volunteer hours. Informal volunteer hours is offering help to someone, and it's more direct without being involved in an organization. So that can include, buying a neighbor's groceries, taking someone to appointments, maybe just going to visit someone. So it's all those other components that we often don't think about maybe as volunteer work, but that was also included in this study. And that's why it's up to 79%. So this is the volunteer types. So it's divided up. So informal, 38%. So that's a big chunk of volunteer time is spent doing informal volunteering. Combination, so some people did both, that was 35%. And those actually with formal, just doing formal volunteer, it's only sitting at 6%. So it's quite low. And this is across Canada again. This is the Canadian statistic. So in Ontario, we actually are sort of level with the national average. 79% of Ontarians over the age of 15 volunteer. Interestingly, we are the third lowest provincial, we have the third lowest provincial volunteer rate. And that's pretty consistent actually from 2013. So why do Canadians volunteer? So some of this, of course, may resonate with you. Of course, people volunteer to make a positive contribution to the community. That's the number one reason. To use their skills and experience that they have, of course. Some people are personally affected by the cause. For example, cancer is a big one. You mentioned Christopher Reeves. He was affected, so he started, to volunteer for those with spinal cord injuries. 43% have friends or people they know that do volunteer work, so they encourage them to also volunteer. And then 22%, a smaller percentage, as a way to find a job. And this is often the younger age group that indicates that that's the reason they volunteer, is to find a job. So, what is the value of volunteering? As you know, there are many values. So, for organizations themselves, having volunteers increases their ability to expand their reach. They have greater capacity to meet the needs of the community. Um, so, volunteers are very helpful in that. Also, volunteers have a variety of skills, so that's great. So, then now their skill set of the organization has increased. And it is a good way for organizations to develop a positive relationship with not only the volunteers, but also in the community. It helps them to look good, right? If an organization has volunteers and is volunteering in the community. In terms of the value of volunteering for the volunteer themselves, volunteers develop a sense of belonging to a group, to an organization. They also develop their skills when they volunteer, um, and it improves their well-being, so their life satisfaction, their confidence a lot of times, and their mental health, and I'll get more into that piece. It is a good way to integrate into the community. So if you're coming from a different community, or you just want to expand your social circle, or if you're a newcomer to the community, volunteering is an excellent way to meet people and to integrate into the community. So this is my favorite part. Being a nurse, I always like to look at the health benefits of anything. So volunteering actually has quite a few health benefits. Now, the evidence, is limited because it is a maybe a newer area that's being studied, but the research does demonstrate that volunteering has a positive impact on seniors' health and on decreasing social isolation, which is an area that we're very concerned about, especially with older adults. So there's been some studies that show that any act of altruism, which means a selfless act, is connected to positive physical and mental effects. So giving, it activates a certain part of our brain, like in the pleasure center, related to pleasure, trust, and relationships with others. So when that happens, we secrete important feel-good hormones like serotonin, dopamine, and oxytocin, and that those three hormones is kind of, it's called the helper's high. Just like the runner's high, when people run, they secrete certain hormones. This is the same type of thing, but it's called the helper's high. The effects of this include lowering blood pressure, increasing our self-esteem. There's less incidence of depression, lower stress levels, and even longer life and greater happiness. So the link between giving, improved health, and longevity may be the decrease in stress that you feel, which is often linked to health issues. So when you're volunteering and you're focused on something else, it helps to decrease your stress levels. So this is kind of the next part. So volunteering does divert your attention from yourself and what's going on with yourself, and it gives you a different perspective because you're involved in something else and you're not focused on what's going on with you. There's also a sense of gratitude when you volunteer as well, and that has been linked to happiness, improved health, and social bonds. So even when we give of our own money or our own time, so the giver, not just the recipient of that, can feel a renewed sense of gratitude. Seeing others benefit from our actions instills a sense of thankfulness for the gifts that we have to offer, which is linked to happiness, health, and stronger social bonds. Volunteering, of course, also links us to our communities, which is great. You have stronger ties to your community. And of course, it gives us a purpose, a meaning, a reason to get up, right? Which we all need. What are some of the barriers to volunteering? Well, of course, our physical health affects our ability to volunteer, right? If we're acutely ill, from a respiratory infection or something like that, but also if we have a chronic condition, might affect our ability to volunteer if we're in pain a lot of the times. So that is a factor for sure. Transportation is another factor. So depending where you have to go to volunteer, um, this event is very nice because it's virtual, so you don't have to go anywhere. So you can volunteer from the comfort of your own home. So that's perfect. Um, Accessibility issues. So if you do have an assistive device or some need for some disability that requires accessibility, you have to consider where you're going, where you're volunteering to ensure that that place is accessible for you. Sometimes there's, of course, costs incurred with volunteering. So I just did a check this morning, actually, for the police check. So currently, Brantford Police, there is no cost for the police check. There is a processing fee, so I guess there's a small cost. It's $10 plus tax. I wasn't able to find the cost of the vulnerable sector check. The police services, it looks like their website was under construction, so I wasn't able to find that. I think there is a cost for that check, in particular when you're working with a specific group, such as children or people with disabilities. It requires a vulnerable sector check, so there may be a cost with that. In terms of the OPP, if you live in the county, their volunteer checks are free. Their police checks are free. So just wanted to let you know that. And most of those, both of those you can do online or in person. So then the cost of gas, of course, we know that that has skyrocketed. So that's another thing to consider. And then parking, bus fare, etc. Some people don't know what volunteer opportunities are available. I often go out to seniors apartment buildings, and there are people that have many skills, but they say to me, I don't know where to go. I don't know how to volunteer and that sort of thing. So that for sure is definitely a barrier. And that's one of the reasons why this presentation came to be, because I was hearing from seniors, they want to do something, they want to contribute, but they just don't know where to go. So how do you get started? A good way is to make a list of your skills, what you're good at, and perhaps your work experience, because that may help you to find your path. Think about what interests you. Are you a person who likes to be, at the front lines? Do you like to present? Do you like to be where the action is? Or do you want to kind of be behind the scenes? So maybe you would be more in an administrative role. Think about what type of audience you'd like to work with. Do you like children? Are you more inclined to work with youth or adults? Maybe you don't like people at all, and animals are your thing. So that's a potential too. So there's lots of opportunity. Another good thing to do is to make a list of the agencies or organizations that fit with your interests, or maybe you've had positive contact with, or you're passionate about, and you can start contacting them. So sometimes cold calls are the best way, or go on a website. Almost every single organization that is around will accept volunteers. There's not many that won't. So the possibilities are really endless. So you can start by contacting the agencies that interest you. I found this quiz, and I've done it with a few seniors. It's kind of interesting. So what type of volunteer are you? So when you do this quiz, it will ask you several questions. It asks you to pick certain pictures that appeal to you. And then it tells you or gives you an idea of some places where maybe it would be suitable for you to volunteer. So if you're interested, you can do that quiz. And these slides will be sent to you as well by Linda, so you'll be able to use that link afterwards. Now, also remember that volunteering can be informal, right? So it doesn't need to be, you don't have to work with an agency. Maybe it's just where you live, in your community, in your neighborhood. If you live in an apartment building, or a complex with seniors, this is another great way. So walking someone's dog, right? So maybe that person is sick and not able to walk their dog. You can offer to walk their dog. You can visit someone who's isolated or maybe under the weather, and pay a visit to them. Making meals for someone. I love when someone makes me a meal. That to me is like amazing. If I don't have to cook, I'm so happy. Dropping off groceries, and I know a lot of people have done this during, during COVID, right? If a friend had COVID, then they would go and they would drop groceries off at their doorstep. So this is a great way to help someone out. Driving someone, right, to church, maybe picking them up for church, driving them to a medical appointment, or maybe even just going out for the day. And then some people, they use their skills to, if they're a knitter, they can knit hats for newborns at the hospitals. They often give them there. The Cancer Society as well. They accept things for people undergoing chemotherapy, so different head coverings as well. I think there's a group that's making quilts for someone else too. So there's all sorts of things you can do. I mean, you come up with an idea, if you've got a certain skill, and I'm sure that you can donate the items you make as well. So lots of opportunities. There are some online resources that you can check out. So Brava is an agency of it's volunteer coordinators that make up Brava, and they're from agencies like John Noble Home, Victorian Order of Nurses, Brant Community Healthcare Center. So they do have a website, and when you go to that website, you'll see all the agencies involved, and it has links to their organizations and their volunteer opportunities. Spark Ontario is another website that you can go to. So you can search by location and by group. So for example, if you want to work with people with disabilities and you live in Brantford, you type in those two things, and sometimes you get a match, and you can see what's available locally. Now, the problem with some of these websites is they're only as good as the agencies update them, right? So if the information is not given to these websites, then they're going to be outdated. So, but I have went to Spark, and it was good to see that there were some very recent volunteer opportunities on that website. Oddly enough, Kijiji, you can find anything on there. So you can even find volunteer opportunities on Kijiji by location again. The city of Brantford, they also are always looking for volunteers as well. So on their website, they have a list of some volunteer opportunities, and a lot of them are linked with the neighborhood associations. So just to note that, Brantford and Brant County do not have a volunteer, like a central database. So you kind of have to search by agency or use some of these websites to look for different volunteer opportunities. And as you know, the Grand River Council on Aging is also a place where you can volunteer. There's lots of different opportunities. Our volunteers today, they're introducing speakers. Mary Lou gave us those little quizzes there, our mind games there. So there's lots of opportunities. We're looking for people to often be at displays that we do in the community. So there's tons of different opportunities to write for the newsletter. So the council is also a great one. Other ideas or other resources, you can talk to family and friends that have volunteered. Previous employers, you can always volunteer with a previous employer. And of course, the newspaper also often has volunteer opportunities in the classified section. And that's my presentation. It was pretty quick, actually. So I think we can open it to questions.